everybody, and welcome to this week's Prophetic Trumpet. We are in the third installment of the series regarding the Four Horsemen. And let me tell you, we are going to get into something really deep, really quick here, and branch off of especially last week's episode, where we started to unveil things regarding the first of the Four Horsemen. Now, if you're interested, you can find the link to purchase one of these shirts. There's no financial exchange here. This is not the intellectual property of Fearless Ministries. This is a good friend of the ministry and that owns the IP for this. You can find the link there if you're interested in getting a Four Horsemen shirt. And they've got all kinds of different assortment there, and they'll be more than happy to take your order and help you out as you support the Four Horsemen. Now, this being said, let's get into this week's teaching, as we are in actually the third week total, but the second week regarding the first of the Four Horsemen. Last week we covered the unveiling of the first horse, as we stated. That's the white horse. Nothing racial about that, by the way. This is all found in Revelation 6. Now, what we're going to do this week is you have to really go back and see where we started. You got to understand that we are covering the commonalities that this horse has with the Mahdi of Islamic prophecy, and how that seems to run parallel to biblical prophecy as to the unveiling of the horse. Now, in Islamic tradition, which came 1,000 plus years after Christianity and after the book of Revelation was written, by the way, you're going to see that this is their Messiah. This is not their horseman. This is their Messiah. So if you want to understand that, you got to go back to the foundation in which we started on last week. So let's pick it up. Again, we are in Revelation 6. We're going to start in verse 1 and verse 2, because that's where we need to start. Next I watched, is what the Word of God says, as the Lamb, that would be Jesus, broke the first of the 7 seals, and I heard one of the 4 living creatures, that's not a horseman, that's an angel that takes a side of the 4 sides of the throne of God, and say with a thundering voice, "Go," or proceed in some translations. Verse 2 says, I looked, and that's John speaking, because he's called up, he's raptured up in the Spirit, and there in front of me was a white horse. We covered the white horse portion last week. Its rider had a bow and was given a crown, and he rode off as a conqueror to conquer. Kind of redundant, but yeah, that's where it is. So the rider is what we're going to focus on today, because the rider is given very little in way of description, other than it's a male. That's all that we know about the rider on top of the white horse. But you may think, so that's a pretty quick lesson, Dr. Dan. Well, you may think that, but we need to go deeper. I told you last week, and even the week before, this is borderline on the dig deep level that we do on Saturday. You're going to go all over the Bible here, so I hope you have your notes ready. This is not going to be on deadlifter.org, but you have the option to pause here, whereas you may not otherwise. So let's look at Daniel chapter 7, verse 8. What does he have to say in correlation to Revelation chapter 6? Well, it's interesting because the prophet Daniel says, while I was thinking about the horns, that's a symbol of power and authority, there before me was another horn. It's a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. So we have a sequence here. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Well, all right, you may think, what does this have to do with a rider in Revelation 6? Well, let's go a little further. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 4. This is Paul's writing, and Paul said, in regards to this particular individual, he will oppose and exalt himself over everything that is called God or that is worshipped. In other words, every faith system. He's going to declare himself to be above it all. So he sets himself up in the temple, in God's temple is what it says, proclaiming himself to be God. So in other words, he will take every faith system and put it beneath his feet and proclaim himself to be the deity of the world and the only true deity of the world. He's going to trample every other faith set. Now, let's see if there's any commonality as we look into the book of Revelation. Well, the book of Revelation, chapter 13, verse 5, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words, blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months. In other words, what we can gather is this guy speaks like a pro wrestler on the bad guy side, otherwise known as heels, where all he's going to talk about is how great thou art. And he's not talking about God, he thinks he is God. He's going to talk about how he's all that there is. Yeah, so, and he just loves to stand there and tell you about it. So let's take a look at another commonality that we can find regarding this writer, and that he's a genius. He's a grand orator, which means he can speak very well. Let's start once again in Daniel chapter 7, verse 20. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns. Oh, there are the horns again, on its head, and about the other horn that came up. So this is 12 verses after what we just covered. Before which 3 of them fell. Got 3 leaders. You can look into the 10 rulers of the world in Revelation 16 and 17 as well. Nonetheless, the horn that looked more imposing than the others and had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully, kind of correlates with what we just talked about. Verse 23 of chapter 8 of the book of Daniel. He's talking about the same individual. In the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. Okay, so he sees the opportunity and he takes it and he rises to the occasion, walking the aisle as only he can. Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 3, another prophet asks, are you wiser than Daniel? Is no secret hidden from you? Because this guy is going to have an overabundance of wisdom. Not common in this day and age where we have completely come to the understanding that common sense is a gift from God. Well, correlates with the Word of God. Give God a prayer for some wisdom and He'll give it to you abundantly. That's what the Word of God says. Now let's go back to Revelation 13. The beast in verse 2 says, John says, the beast I saw resembled a leopard, and he had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. Obviously, this is all symbolic. The dragon gave his beast, that would be Satan, giving power to this individual. He gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. Does Satan have a throne? Oh, yes, he does. This world belongs to him, but it's on lease because Jesus is going to come back and take over ownership once again because he has the keys to it. Now, nonetheless, so we've learned that he has a big mouth and he boasts. We've learned that he's a genius, and we learned that he can speak very well. Let's just be honest. But we also learn, oh, here's the shocker to a lot of you who have this unusual affection for the people in this profession, but he's going to be a very effective politician. And if you know anything about politicians, yeah, they're not exactly the most godly people on the face of the earth. Daniel chapter 11 verse 21 says he will be succeeded by a contemptible person who has not been given the honor of royalty. Oh. He will invade the kingdom when its people feel secure. That's invading Israel. And he will seize it through intrigue. That's wisdom. Daniel chapter 8, verse 25. So we go back to where we were when we were speaking about him being a genius and a grand orator. He will cause deceit to prosper. In other words, he's going to be a master of propaganda. Oh my gosh, does that mean it's going to get worse? Yes. All the lies of fake media are going to get worse. And he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, that would be the Jews, he will destroy many and take a stand against the Prince of Princes. That would be Yeshua, the Messiah. Yet he will be destroyed, but it won't be by human power. Again, we see he's an effective politician. He can talk his way into position and power. That would be politicking. That would be going over, when quite honestly you shouldn't be going over. Alright, so we've established he's got a big mouth, he can talk very well, he's a genius, he's an effective politician. Now let's get into the economic sector, because guess what? He's a genius at that too. Revelation 13 is where we continue, verse 17. So they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, this being the mark of the beast, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. So he's a financial genius because he is going to be able to control everything and monitor everything. I have disclosed to you in a previous series, there are 4 segments to the beast system, and it is all controlled by artificial intelligence. Central bank currency, digital currency, is another portion of it, so you have half of it right there. Then you get into the health aspects. I'm not going to start teaching on the mark of the beast. I want to stay on this horse, the white horse and its rider. Alright, so he's an economic genius. In Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 4 and 5, you may say, we were just in Ezekiel 28. You're right, we were. These are the next 2 verses. By your wisdom and understanding you have acquired riches for yourself, and have acquired gold and silver for your treasuries. By your great wisdom, again we go back to he's a genius, by your trade, he's a great politician, you have increased your riches, and your heart is filled up and lifted up because of your riches. In other words, he's a rich guy. He is a very rich guy, but guess what? He got his wealth through politics and by taking over and going over. Psalm 52, you're like, wow, that's a strange place to go for prophecy. No, a lot of people just don't teach it right. So Psalm 52, verse 7 declares, how now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth, and grew strong by destroying others. This is the question everybody's going to ask. How can it be? How can he have this level of success if he doesn't honor God? Yeah, I think we already know the answer to that question. It happens all the time in this world. Daniel chapter 11, verse 38, we continue. Instead of them, he will honor the god of fortresses. That's a god of war, by the way. A god of unknown to his ancestors. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. In other words, he's going to give a sacrifice of very costly goods to this unknown deity. Now, 5 verses forward, in verse 43 of chapter 11 of the book of Daniel, says he will gain control of the treasuries of gold and silver and all the riches of Egypt. In other words, if you're in Egypt, it's coming. You're going to get conquered. With the Libyans and the Cushites in submission. In other words, he's going to pound them to bits as well, but he's going to get the gold and the riches of everything in Egypt. Okay, so we've covered that he's an economic genius. We've covered that. We've covered that he takes over areas, honestly, through means that are beyond what he has. Could that make him a strong military leader? Ho ho, well, funny you ask. In Daniel again, chapter 28, verse 24, it says, he will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. Talking about a strong nation here that God has deemed as holy. Wow, I think we can count on one hand who that is. Revelation chapter 6, verse 2 kind of coincides because we've already read this. I looked, there before me was a white horse. its rider held a bow, and he was given a crown, that's authority, and he rode out as a conqueror to be bent on conquest. That's where we started. Oh, it's a big circular pattern. Let's take it a little deeper. Revelation 13 verse 4. People worship the dragon because he had been given authority to the beast. That would be Satan giving the authority to the Antichrist, or this rider on this white horse. And they also worshipped the beast. That's a spiritual act. But check this out. Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? He's a strong military leader, ladies and gentlemen. He's rich. He's a politician. He conquers with means that are not his own. He gains wealth by stealing it, by conquering for it, because he's a strong military leader. Okay, we've got two more to cover here. He implements strong belief. Now, some of you may say, oh, isn't that awesome? That's what we need. Well, let's take a look at this. Again, we're in Revelation chapter 13, verses 1 and 2. The dragon, that being Satan, stood on the sand of the seashore, representing the Gentile kingdom. Then I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns, 7 heads. We've talked about horns in the book of Daniel. And on his horns were 10 diadems, those are crowns. On his heads were blasphemous names, those are people that speak out against God. And the beast, which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like those of a bear, mouth like that of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. We've covered some of this. So we begin to see how the worship starts to come about. In verse 17 of chapter 17, ironically, where we have spoke of, God has put into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to hand over the beast their royal authority until God's words are fulfilled. These are the 10 horns that are referred to in the book of Daniel. These are the 10 horns referred to that represents power in the 10 kingdoms that are coming to the world. I have taught on this channel before. It's coming, and it's kind of ironic that it ties back to the Club of Rome. And what you see here, potentially, is the Club of Rome getting their wish, and then the United Nations and the World Economic Forum getting their wish with going from 10 to 1 rulers. Now, so he implements strong belief, because there's a lot of agreement among world leaders to hand everything over to him. Here's the final one. He unifies faith systems. Remember, we read earlier he's going to trample them. He's going to put them under his feet because he's going to claim he's superior to them all. Well, if you go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 4, it says he will oppose and exalt himself above everything. We have read this previously. That is called God, to be worshipped. He then sets himself in God's temple. That would be on the Temple Mount, by the way, proclaiming himself to be God. Revelation 13:3, we've talked about this. One of the heads, again, a symbol of power, of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast because he's setting them up for worship. In verses 14 and 15, this is where we conclude for the day, because the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast. That would be, well, never mind. It deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the first beast, who was wounded with the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refuse it to worship the image of the beast or be killed. Okay, so this, we're going to get into the identity of this person later in the teaching. That is where we wrap up for the day. We try to keep these concise. Hopefully we're within 15 minutes. Hope I didn't lose anybody. The notes are going to be up in the section where you would expect it. If you missed any of the scriptural references, that's easy for me to say. We hope that you all followed along and that you're learning very deeply about the 4 horsemen. Hope you all have yourselves an incredible day, and I hope that you take the opportunity and share the light of the world. God bless.